Assignment 3.1 video, creating an inclusive and supportive classroom. I am your host, David Gutierrez, and I teach 7th grade health in a middle school. So in episode 3 from Teacher Down the Hall, we are introduced to Luigi Novoa. It's the teacher down the hall. And Luigi talks about his upbringing, talks about his childhood, and more importantly, his experiences being a multilingual student in a public school system. And because of those experiences, he talks about why when he became a teacher, he knew how to be made aware of his students' struggles and his students' hardships. He also offers advice for teachers. Teachers can make lessons more accessible to English learners by using visuals and speaking while pointing to objects. He mentions that, we live in a world with ChatGPT, with AI. So he says it's okay to use this technology as long as we are incorporating some kind of grouping that will benefit the student, right? And also, I think the biggest takeaway is listen to the needs and struggles of your students. And at the end of the podcast, he shares his story with his math teacher. So in the podcast, Mr. Novoa talks about some of the challenges faced by students from cultural and linguistic backgrounds. So he talks about when he used to work at his magnet school, he had students that would commute 1 hour to get to school, which is something that the other population didn't have to worry about. He talks about students getting in trouble because they don't know what are the norms when you're in a bus. They don't know what is expected of them and how to behave and act when maybe back home it's a different experiences, right? So how do we support these students, right? How do we support them? He says ask questions that are personal. So bring the students into the conversation, get to know their personal stories, right? And don't exclude anyone. Those are the big 3 key points he mentions. He shares a story where he does a lesson on Japanese internment camps, and he uses this to integrate a phonics lesson with one of his multilingual students. So he talks about, as a teacher, be aware when you're teaching and you're pointing to objects, so that way everybody is looking at you but also comprehending what it is that they're doing as the assignment is. He also mentions visuals, right? Include all the pictures you can in your lesson to help our English learners make those connections with words they might not understand. So reflecting on my own experiences with students with similar backgrounds and challenges is I do have students that are English language learners in my classroom. So vocabulary is something we struggle with, comprehending complex grade level vocabulary. So this semester we incorporated the context structure sound reference, CSSR technique, where students go through this series of steps in trying to make sense of words. So when a student reads a text, they just skip the difficult word. Now with this technique, they have to try to figure out the meaning of the word. They have 4 different techniques of doing this before they can give up and look it up on Google or do a research in a simple way. So the way I use this in my classroom, I'm showing you a screenshot of my iReady portfolio, is I choose a health class, and then I do something called paired reading. So iReady collects data. Students did a beginning of the year diagnostic test. They did it in math. They did it in English. So based on their scores, the system has their Lexile reading levels, their math levels. So using this data, I can go ahead and group students based on their Lexile levels. So if you're looking here, you notice that the way that the system groups or pairs the students, it pairs one high student with one low student. And that pairing is done to help students when they read aloud text, so that way the high level student can support the low level student. So how I use this in the classroom, I gave the students an article. They have these in bookmarks. I printed them out for them, bookmarks of the CSSR technique. So they're reading this text with their partner, right? They're taking turns reading out loud. And when they find a key term, they circle this key term, and they go ahead and try to make sense of this word using context clues, using prefixes, suffixes, and or trying to find like the Spanish pronunciations of words. For example, here we're talking about sexual orientation. We're talking about heterosexual, right? Meaning attraction to somebody from the opposite sex. So in this example, the prefix hetero means different. So, helping students make those connections as they read words, not just read over them and not make any sense of what that word could have meant. And these are my references, my citations for this week's assignment. Thank you for listening, and I am signing off.